Folks, welcome back to So Bad It's Good. Yesterday, I burned through this new docu-series that you're going to be able to see on ID Discovery. It's going to be Monday, May 26th. It's also going to be available to stream on Max. It's called Sherri Papini Caught in the Lie. And it is this investigative retelling of Sherri Papini's story from the days leading up to her disappearance into the alleged abduction, her shocking return to her family, and the aftermath that led to her 2022 arrest. The really fascinating part of this docuseries that Sherri Papini has participated in it. So she is on camera, just revealing so much information, revelations, the whole nine. So today we are pleased to have director Nicole Rittenmeyer with us. Nicole, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Nicole, first off, congratulations, obviously, but second off, how did this come to be? How did you get Sherri Papini to talk about this for the first time?
So I was brought on after Sherri was already secured. And there, we had to do like a vibe check. She didn't get final say over who the director was going to be, but we had to make sure that, there was a connection there. And she just really, really, she's been dying to tell her story. There was no trial. So what that means, usually, trials exist in our culture as in cases like this as the definitive word on what happened, right? But there wasn't one because she pleaded and she never told her side of things. So de facto, what's happened is all of these documentaries and other shows that feature a very one-sided narrative. Keith has participated in most of them.
And Keith is her ex-husband, you guys, that went through this with Sherri and the family.
Yes. So that is what stands. And a lot of it is frankly inaccurate, as we discovered.
Inaccurate, in regards to Sherri and her, her first person viewpoint on this. But I guess the first question too is that was Sherri paid to participate in this, or was this paid through a third party or anything? Because that was the question I kept wondering throughout this, because I was wondering, why do this? Was it just the urge to tell your story?
Yeah, no. So we don't pay for interviews. So no. But Sherri, and we talked to Dr. Ramani, who's the psychiatrist, who the sort of objective, not Sherri's therapist, but the outside psychiatrist that we spoke to, said, it's a basic human need to want to have your story heard. And she's been sitting for 7 years, biting her tongue while people really, the conventional wisdom is she's a narcissist, a sociopath who manipulated, perpetrated a hoax kidnapping and abandoned her children, all of these things. Many of those things are untrue. I will leave it to viewers to determine which, but we proved that some of them were untrue.
Yeah, it does take you, through the 4-part series, it does take you through the entirety of, leading up to and the obvious aftermath. But, there's huge revelations. This is the first time where she says, James, who she was at the house with or the apartment with for 22 days, she's saying that he abducted her. This is completely new information that I had never heard anywhere. And, you have people that worked on the case with the FBI. You have somebody retired that had worked on the FBI. And this had never come up. And why do you think it has taken this long for this huge piece of information to come up? Because James, he cooperated and no charges were filed. They were not looking in his direction at all.
Right. So when Sherri's confronted by the FBI with the information that they've spoken with James, she doubles down and just keeps saying, it was 2 Hispanic women. It was 2 Hispanic women. Our show, we sort of get into the reasons why anybody would do that. She had quite a bit at stake. She had quite a bit to lose if she admitted while her husband was sitting in the room that she wasn't kidnapped by 2 Hispanic women. So that's part of it. That's a huge part of it. The other part of it is that James, we have to remember, these allegations against James have never been investigated because they didn't come out at trial. Sherri never admitted to him. The FBI at the point that they were at in the investigation They knew Sherri was lying. She was lying, right? And they were looking to corroborate that. So when they interview James, which you hear in our show, when they
Yeah.
interview James, he tells them exactly what they expected to hear, which is that, Sherri told him to do what he did, that the whole thing was her idea. Obviously, like everybody in this story, James also has an agenda. They make it very clear to him that if she asked him to do these things, if she planned it, then he has no culpability. He has no criminal liability. So, he's invested in that narrative as well.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see that. A lot of this also takes place with burner phones, which you set up is that's how Sherri and James were communicating. And she's saying she was communicating because, she had an overbearing husband. She wasn't getting the love and support she felt she needed. And so she looked to get that elsewhere. And that is where James, an ex of hers from, I don't know, 20 plus years earlier, comes into that picture. The question I also had, just as pretty remedial, is that were they with burner phones? I don't know how they work. Were they ever able to get these burner phones and see the communication? Because I was like, that would clear up a lot of this.
Wouldn't it? Yeah. So that is so fascinating because we know there were burner phones. We know where the burner phones were. The FBI interprets and Department of Justice interpret that data as clear evidence of planning a hoax kidnapping. Sherri says it's something very different, but unless we have the actual substance of the text messages, which are lost to time, we don't know.
Yeah. But she does admit to contacting and having this communication with him. But it is interesting because it really what I found fascinating about this, it comes down to the believability of Sherri, and I think at some point, maybe in the fourth one, you have one of the agents talk about like the boy who cried wolf. Is that if you lie repeatedly again and again, how are we supposed to take anything that you say as fact? Which I think this confronts that. And there's a bit of a mystery because this is, I wouldn't say pro Sherri, but it puts her perspective out there for maybe the first time, but you also leave it in the hands of the audience to determine how they want to feel about it. You as a documentarian, I've talked to so many documentarians over the years, and I always just wonder, how do you go in with any sort of objectiveness on this? You're there to do the Sherri Papini story, but at the same time, how do your personal feelings not get intermixed with it? How do you stay somewhat, at a zero?
Yeah, yeah. No, it's such a great question. It was a challenge on this show more than any other show I've done. And the way I did it is I have an amazing team that I bring with me everywhere whose judgment I totally respect, and they check me. 5 producers. And we talked about this thing ad nauseum. I mean, one of the things that happens when you're a documentarian, you're dealing with somebody who's an unreliable narrator. You go in expecting that they're going to try to play you. So everything she said, I say this a lot, but if Sherri Papini told me my mother loved me, I was going to get a second source, right? No, it was exhausting because every single thing she said, you'd have to like double and triple check to make sure. You don't want to give a platform to somebody to just put more lies out, right? So we were really, really rigorous in running everything down. And I told her from the very beginning, I told her therapist, I told her attorneys, I told her friends, I told her sister-in-law, who she considers to be her sister, her parents, anybody who agreed to sit with us. One of the first things I said to them was, my job here is to follow this story where it takes me. And if it takes me to a place where I find out that Sherri is just doubling down and perpetrating yet another lie and trying to use us to do it, that's the show I'm going to make. That's what I'm going to say. Everybody, and to Sherri too. So everybody has to be real clear that it was very important to be transparent about what we were trying to do. And that was just tell the story we found. And I think we did that.
You definitely were able to tell this story very effectively. I mean, one of the things that I've really never, I don't think I've seen yet, is that Sherry participates in her own reenactments in this, and I will say, like, listen, for somebody who's watched a lot of this, there was an element of there was I almost there was a light chuckle almost because I was like, this is dark. Like this is dark to have somebody participate in because there are certain holes in Sherry's memory, as she says, that she doesn't remember exactly. She's running, the phone is left behind with her hair in it, which she said was maybe potentially a clue for Keith to come get her, but she doesn't remember the actual, alleged abduction. And I just thought, with the five producers, where was this? What was the conversation like with Sherry of would you participate? Because you actually use reaction shots where she's running and then the actual, we see her participating in this reenactment of the abduction. Like that kind of blew me away. What were the conversations behind that? And how hard was it to get Sherry on board? Or was she like, yeah, let's do it?
Yeah, so that that was really cool. And also probably skirted real close to some ethically dangerous territory.
Yeah. Even
Um,
you have her therapist on like, saying like, listen, my thing is to first do no harm. I mean, he even seemed to be kind of astounded by this.
yeah, and it very clearly triggered her. So, I didn't know what was gonna happen. It was, the idea came up like, wouldn't it be cool if Sherry actually did her reenactments? Because everybody expects a Sherry, a lookalike, will be doing the running or whatever. But she, sounds like I'm exploiting her mental issues here, which and to some degree I must cop to. A manifestation of her personality disorder is she is a pleaser. She really likes to please. So she was game to do anything. She didn't want to do the reenactment, but when I, explained to her how useful it would be to have her in the same spot kind of, and I knew something would happen. I just didn't know what. I'll be honest, I mean it was a dark motivation on some level on my part because I was like, that's where I'm going to get her. Something's going to happen, she's going to slip up and she'll reveal that she actually does remember it, or that she, it was like this or it was like that. I mean, that's true. I will answer
Yeah.
that. That is not what happened at all. I did not expect what happened. None of us did. And whatever you think about Sherry and whether or not she's still lying, um, everyone who was on the set that day, down to the sound guy and the drone operator, we all saw it and it was incredibly believable. You cannot fake that kind of, you could see her tremble from 20 paces. We captured it on film, and you can't fake that kind of autonomic response. I checked.
Yeah. Yeah, you put
Yeah.
yourself but I mean, the audience really will go through this range of emotions watching this, and obviously all we have is ourselves to go by when we watch any piece of art, and you put yourself in that situation, and I was putting myself in that situation, and you do argue that back and forth because 'cause you're like, "Well, you're gonna have a reaction regardless because this is where your life completely changed. This is regardless of if you were abducted or you were completely in on it, this led you down a path that you could have never expected." So I found myself constantly arguing with myself while watching this whole four parts because I was like, well, I could give her this, but we really become this judge, jury, and executioner of this story, which by the way, I've lived with this story for so long because I've watched so many documentaries on this. I watched the Hulu, obviously from Keith's perspective, and you really are trying to make sense of this. My other thought was, does this or have you had any bites in terms of reopening this and looking at James further? You do have a little bit with James at the end of this, and obviously not wanting to participate. But, is this reopening anything, and could potentially Sherry get into more trouble for completely not changing her story, but revealing something that people might say that she should have revealed in the very beginning? Because if you're trying to get away from Keith, why not just rip the Band-Aid right there? But then even then, I'm arguing with myself about victim's mentality.
Right. Right. And the stakes, she was so invested in the lie. The stakes were so high for her. She had so much to lose. And as she says, and her therapist says, when it did come out, that, she was with James the whole time. She did lose everything. She lost her kids, she lost her property, she lost her marriage. That's what she was desperately trying to hold on to. So, and now I forgot the question.
No, I mean, it was just like, are we at risk of, are we at risk, or is it beneficial? Like, will they reopen this case to take
Oh,
a
yeah.
harder look at James, or could this potentially get her into more legal trouble at some point?
Yeah. So it is risky on some level. I mean, I will say this, the DOJ, I tried because I wanted to hear what they had to say about Sherri's version of events, and they wouldn't even let the prosecutor that I interviewed, Veronica Alegria, and her minder, because anytime you do an interview with the feds, there's a minder. They would not let me tell them Sherri's story because then they are professionally
Yeah.
obligated to look into it. And she, as a convicted liar, an admitted liar, is not a credible witness. So that's a case they can't win. Now, there's an argument about, I mean, Sherri would love to pursue criminal charges. She has asked me about that several times, like how could we do it? The problem is, where is the evidence going to be 7 years on? It's a he said, she said.
Yeah. And originally it was tied to James because there was DNA, I believe, on her underwear, which you point out, and that's what led to James. They got a hit in the DNA testing. And he was very open when I mean, he lied at first, and then an hour into the interviews, which you have, he said, listen, I was helping her out, this kind of thing. I was helping her escape. The point that Sherri also makes, and I want to remind the audience, is that, she was found, there was branding on her. It said Exodus. And she makes the point of, I didn't brand myself. I wouldn't do this. And she says this was James. Also, there were cuts, bruises. She lost a lot of weight. Now you have, the officials saying you did this to yourself. You did all of these things to yourself. You might have used James as help, but this was your plan. And then you got dumped and you blamed it on two Hispanic women, which even then we have her requesting to make the drawings of these women. And she says that it was, one of them looked like James's mother. And that could because that was another breadcrumb for Keith to potentially find her. But then you have this fascinating part in the docuseries where James's mother doesn't look like this sketch at all. She's Irish. She's not Hispanic.
Well, for accuracy,
Yeah, please.
like, she looks quite a bit like the sketch.
Okay. But she's Irish, not Hispanic.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And I thought that was another really interesting thing. And so you're really torn in this story with Sherri. You talked about her mental health and her, you bring up people pleasing, and the docuseries brings up her people pleasing, which, by the way, I also want to point out, one of the people that actually kind of helped her in her time of need was Suzanne Papini, which is her sister-in-law, correct? Which is Keith's sister, and took her in. And we have footage of them, like hanging out but at the same time, I was arguing with myself once again, if she's a people pleaser, of course she's going to make Suzanne feel like she is number one. Like maybe she just goes through life making everybody feel like there's a bright spotlight on them. And so you're more endeared to her. But isn't that weird that us as an audience, we do think those things? Like, are you prepared for that?
Well, so there's that, yes, and I thought the same thing, there's a thing that she does. I think she's also just a relatively decent, some people are just born with a gift where they're a good judge of character, and they're good at sort of interpersonal connection. Sherri does things, I don't even think she's aware that she's doing it, where she'll start using the language that I use. She's her attorney called her chameleonic, and I think that's right. But also that doesn't necessarily mean that there is maleficent intent, right? She lied as a protective mechanism. It's law enforcement, we tend to see lying as you're covering up, you're intending to deceive. Sherri's lying is a defense mechanism that she employs, after trauma.
Yeah.
That's her diagnosis. So it's I think it's important to look at the reasons why people lie. in this perception. I mean, I hope, not really trying to persuade anybody of anything, trying to put the facts out there, but certainly this notion that, she perpetrated a hoax kidnapping for attention just doesn't track. And to,
Yeah, for attention. Yeah.
yeah, to the thing that you said before, Ryan, about getting people in her orbit. I kind of thought the same thing, right? I kind of thought like, oh, she's warm, she's ingratiating, people are drawn to her. She just persuades and convinces them. And then I met Mo Delamora. Then I met other women that she went to prison with. These are not women who are easily charmed. These are women who know
Yeah.
liars.
You guys, they have interviews with people she went to prison with, and they actually have like archival footage and photos. And the photos, this blows me away. It always seems like, listen, I cover a lot of Real Housewives and reality shows. And I remember when Teresa Giudice went to prison, there were a People magazine photo spread where she's right in the middle with all of her friends that she made in prison. And the same thing with Sherri Papini. Sherri Papini is in the middle of these, where I was like, she's the most popular person in prison, it looks like.
After, being meek and hiding and being scared and all that. But then she starts telling people her story. And this is a population that, most women, just statistically, who are incarcerated, are themselves victims of some kind of crime. And they have that in common, if you believe Sherri's version of events.
Yeah. I mean, that was really eye-opening. Now, of course, a lot of this, Keith is brought up, her ex-husband, and we've heard Keith's side of this. And Keith, did you ever go to him and ask for participation, or was that something that you didn't even want to mess with to
Oh,
begin with?
no, we definitely did. We didn't get a response. And then, as we were wrapping up the show, we left a little window like, hey, here's another opportunity. And we gave him a list of Sherri's allegations, and he responded through his lawyers, with a bunch of evidence that, we included in the show. We stand by the show.
Would you be willing to do a 4-part docuseries with Keith?
Willing. Sure, willing. I think he already had that, though.
He did. No, I'm just now. I'm just like now. I'm in this world that I've been living in for 4 hours yesterday. That I'm kind of like, well, how do we? Because my other thing was I want to know more about Sherri Papini's history pre Keith. I want to know after this. Like we get a lot of the after, but like I had read she is dating somebody again. I read like there are certain aspects of her life that I think we are all so curious about. And that's the thing is like, where do we go from here? Because I don't believe this story is over. And I'm so interested to hear the discourse on this, which by the way, I was looking at your resume. You have this really amazing resume, but you also worked on the Jussie Smollett
Yes.
case as well, which is really, I mean, there are similarities in the sense that, is this a giant hoax? Is this a giant lie? And I was wondering if you could compare and contrast. I know we're not supposed to do that with victims, but when they come into the pop culture lens, we tend to do that. Were there any similarities working on these two projects?
It's so interesting that you asked that. I sort of assumed that there would be. When I came to the thing, I sort of assumed that, and I'll be honest with you, in the beginning, I was like, oh, there's not going to be enough meat here. She's going to show up and she's going to be like, I was on drugs or I was going through something or whatever. And it was all going to be, she's going to hang it all on that. Turned out to not be that at all. The Jussie Smollett story is very different because in that case, the guys who did the thing, who he hired to do the thing, I interviewed.
Yes, yeah.
That there wasn't a lot of, that story was more the politics of how it got blown up to the degree that it was blown up and why he was let out and all those things. This is a very to some degree, we'll never know what happened in those 22 days unless somebody, he or she, because they both have versions of events that are completely contradictory.
Yeah. Yeah.
So which one of them do you believe, really?
Well, we live in a post Gone Girl era, where, which was a huge book with Gillian Flynn and made into a movie. But and I think we are more apt to believe fantastical notions than sometimes the reality of situations. Now, I can go there with Sherri, or I think this paints a clear picture of maybe Keith was this overbearing husband. Like, you're not going to be able to argue with me that men don't do bad things because, my God, that's why they're men. It seems like that is one of the purposes of being a man. Sorry for all the men out there. But it's then sometimes like that's the frustrating aspect of you don't get a burner phone, or you don't. There are so many times where you wanted to be like, you could have stopped right here. You could have stopped right here. And that's the thing, is that you're then going by the reliability of a first person testimony that took so long to come out. Because she is reliable. She comes off as reliable in these talking heads. She comes off likable at times, even though there are a couple of moments where in the talking head, there's a frightening laugh. But even then, I'm questioning myself of like, well, of course, she's just acting naturally. But through this lens of potentially not believing her, you look at it as this kind of sinister laugh at times,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes. You come to it because there's this preconceived notion of who she is. It is very hard to unknow that. It's very hard to unsee that. So you're incredibly skeptical of her. Even I in the chair trying to be completely open-minded. You're just always, nobody Dr. Ramani says it really well. Nobody wants to be the fool, right? You don't want to get played by a player. And so you're looking for a way to kind of catch her. And I frankly thought I would catch her a lot more frequently than I did. And I gotta say, I mean, I know a couple things. She is very, very smart. She absolutely has an agenda. But of course, don't we all? I have an agenda in this interview. Keith has an agenda.
Wait, you have an agenda in this interview? How dare? Am I being used right now?
No,
What?
totally.
Wait, where's my 4-part docuseries? This is crazy.
You know what I mean? Like there's there's she's going to be met with a next level of scrutiny by anyone who encounters her, including viewers. She got it from me. I mean, I was really, and that was one of the reasons why there's more of me in this, or my voice in the show than I typically would prefer, because the audience needed to see that we weren't just taking what she said at face value. We were, pushing back and testing her and pushing her a lot. And like I said, I thought I'd catch her in a lot more stuff than I did.
Has Sherri seen the final edit of these 4 parts?
She will see it when
No.
everybody else.
Okay, now there was something that was cleared up, I believe, in the last couple of days, is that there is a part, I think, in part 3 of this, where she talks about the financial situation between her and Keith. And it was brought up that Keith was the one that really suggested that she file, well, was it not for unemployment, for benefits?
Disability, yeah.
Yeah, disability benefits, but she wouldn't receive that money. That would be Keith, potentially or allegedly. What was the story there?
Sure, sure. So according to Sherri and according to Sherri's therapist at the time, and that her diagnosis was extreme post-traumatic stress disorder. She really was incapable of functioning. Now you can say, as Keith did in his documentary series, that was not all an act, but she was diagnosed by a professional and she responded positively to PTSD therapy. So she couldn't do things like fill stuff out, she asked Keith to manage her bank accounts. So technically, he filled out, it may have been his idea. She says they arrived at it together. But they filled out the Social Security disability forms. But since he was managing all the money, every time there was a deposit, sometimes all of that money would go right to Keith's bank account. Now, Keith's response, when we asked him about that, Keith's response was, this was recompensation for Sherri's part of household expenses. That is his version of why it went that way. Her version is he controlled all the finances. I had no control over them. So we included his response. It's almost like those 22 days. Nobody, every couple manages their finances differently. It's entirely possible that that he was just being recompensated for
Yeah.
or whatever. It's also entirely possible that she had no control over her own money.
Yeah, I mean, that wouldn't surprise me in so many cases in marriages, unfortunately. But also, I don't begrudge the fact that she went on disability. I would probably suggest the same thing of a spouse if they went through what she was saying she would go through, and she did have PTSD. That would make a lot of sense. But that is something then you can target on her criminally. And she served less than a year in prison. She had to pay, or is having to pay, restitution. And does she have any idea of, in her head, best case scenario, worst case scenario of what this does for her? Because I imagine in today's media, wasteland, is that you want this to get out there. You want people to watch this. Like, this is something that you're like, Sherri Papini, oh my God, I'm in. I read Sherri, I was like, I'm fully in on this. But then it's just going to drudge up potentially so many things, which I talked about at the beginning. Did you talk to her about best case, worst case once this is released?
I mean, I think, and she says she's already been through the worst. Like, it's not gonna get worse from here. She does have stalkers. She has online harassers. She has people who, they think she tried to murder her children. So you can imagine, what they've threatened to do online. Um, so I think she's prepared for it, but I also think that this is as fair a hearing as she's gonna get, because and it's the first time she's spoken at all. So I think she's just the sense that I get from her, is that she's kind of like, I'm telling my truth, take it or leave it, but this is my truth, and I too have a right to share my version of the story, which I am the center.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I was surprised, I guess, and I shouldn't be, that there was a little bit of an indignancy with her and a little bit of like a low level anger about certain topics in this. And I will say another docuseries, more from Keith's perspective, brought up that allegation with the children, saying she was trying to poison them with alcohol. I'm trying to remember the specific details, but she's actually, what was her explanation for that allegation that was brought forth?
Her explanation is that, and I will say, as a mother, I have children who get car sick, and smelling alcohol soaked pads is a thing that helps with nausea. So when I first saw that allegation, I was like, that doesn't even track. Like, I don't. That's not how you make someone sick. What if that's truly how she was trying to make her kids sick? She's really bad at it. Um, but her explanation is, when her kids are sick, they're stuffy, a lot of moms will put Vicks on their chest, like my
Yeah.
girl used to do with us. I did with my kids. But her kids have incredibly sensitive skin. Sherri herself, which I think is genetic, Sherri herself has a lot of allergies. And Vicks makes them rash. So instead, she would get these rags and soak them with essential oils like eucalyptus, which is basically the active ingredient in Vicks, but put it in a cloth bag that was sort of loosely tied. It could come off. It wasn't like a dangerous thing, so that they could inhale the fumes of the essential oils to clear their congestion. And that was investigated by CPS and found to be so.
Where are we at, though? And this is I mean, the most horrific part is that there's children involved, obviously. And Sherri wants to have access to these kids. I mean, what is the deal thus far? And this is another, what I was talking about. Could this affect her ability to be with her kids? Or, because I'm sure this is ongoing. And I mean, I'm not sure, what is the custody arrangement as of now?
Well, the custody arrangement, Keith got official legal and physical custody of the kid when she went to prison, because she was going to prison. And what she maintains is, once her circumstances, what the court order was, once her circumstances changed, that was supposed to be revisited. Her circumstances changed. She got out of prison, but Keith is not letting her see the kids. So he was abiding by a court order where she saw them. I believe it is once it's complicated, but I think she gets phone calls and she sees them once a month, or at least one of her children. But her custody trial was put on hold and is actually tomorrow. Is yeah. So in terms of this film affecting it, it shouldn't, because it should be resolved by then.
Wow. So Tuesday, this custody hearing is gonna happen, and so we should have some sort of answer or find out next steps tomorrow in regards to the children. But I will say, even from Keith's perspective, if, because she did not tell Keith that James, she held true to this initial lie with James, I would imagine that I would not want her to have any sort of custody with the children if I were to believe all of this, and I just kept thinking like, well, how many bad things can happen to one person in a row? Like, obviously she's in this marriage that she feels is very constrictive, and then she starts this relationship with an ex, and this person ends up abducting her, and it just like, how many bad things can happen to one person? But I would think, if I was going with the information that Keith had at the time, that I would fight to keep those children, because I would not be able to trust what the truth is. And so I'm not. No, there are elements of Keith where I'm like, yeah, I could see that is, he really missed badly in certain areas as a husband, but I could understand where he would fight for custody for them. Was that something that you could understand as well?
Well, I mean, one thing that Chase Kinney, her family law attorney, has said is we do not take children away because someone lied.
Which,
Um,
those attorneys, by the way, you have the little clip you put in with the vaping. I was like, that is top notch. I was like, wow,
she's
those little details, those she's ripping a vape before, like, and I was like, those little details are what makes these for me, because and I'm just like, I love those kind of character details where you're like, oh, somebody's gonna play you in a movie one day. Like, it's done.
she's too big a character to not just like I would have just I want to make a Chase show. But no,
Why? Seriously, yeah.
she should have her own TV show. Um, but no, I think her now I forgot the question. I'm so sorry.
No, just in regards to taking the children away, and they had said, you don't take a children away
Yes.
because somebody
Yes, what
lies.
Lisa said is, not only has she served her time, yes, she pleaded guilty to a thing. She served her time for that thing. She's been in therapy for years and years. Um, and we don't take children away for lying. Chase, it's a family law practice run by a family. Her father has something like 40 years in the business. And, they give kids back for a lot less than Sherri has been accused of. So it seems like she should at least get a reasonable hearing to get increased custody, visitation or partial or something. It has been a very long time.
As we start winding down here, this has been really fast. Oh, sorry. Yeah. I just wanted to know from you, like, did you grow up wanting to do this? How do you go into this line of work? And obviously it seems like you are busy, 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 but like, what was the initial dream for you?
This,
I mean, did you want to, like, were
yeah,
you like, I want to tackle tough cases and tough subjects and
totally. Dark stuff is my happy place, and complexity. My very favorite thing is fixing a crooked narrative. I just think there's a lot of these big sensational stories, we don't get the full 360 picture. People, both victims and perpetrators, tend to be dehumanized, and it gets reduced to like the simplest iteration of events. And it's always like the complexity and the real story is so much better than the fictionalized version. Always. Truth, it gets me.
I mean, that's why movies are dying, because real life is stranger than fiction. And you look like these real stories really happen. And I just got to say, this was a really fascinating watch. I think sometimes it is going to be infuriating for the audience. I think you're going to go back and forth and back and forth. And there are so many little details that I wish I could talk to you for another 2 hours, but that you as the audience, you're going to really, I think, revel in these little details. You have video, you have phone calls recorded with your children. You have all of these little things that kind of add up to a really fascinating, a little bit more than your the normal docuseries you see of these topics. It kind of goes a way deeper. And with Sherri Papini at the center, I am going to be buckled in for all the discourse this is going to create. But I'm just so pleased to make your acquaintance today. And once again, congratulations, and just a really fascinating piece of work. And I hope I get to talk to you again someday. But remember, folks, this is going to be over 2 nights on Discovery ID. You're also going to be able to stream this on Max. And then please come back and talk to me about this. I don't think I'm done talking about this. I want to see where this goes. And I think that is sometimes the point of all of this. So I just wanted to say, once again, thank you so much. And I wish you so much success with this.
Thank you kindly, Ryan. I appreciate it.